Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Aaron Burr from the Thought Doctrine, and you're listening to a new episode of the Aaron Burr broadcast. So today I have John back on the show.
Hey, Aaron, thanks again. I really do appreciate it. I enjoy being part of your podcast, and I'm looking forward to our topic of discussion tonight.
All right, so once again, we're going to have a 30-minute discussion, and today I want to talk about an axiom, the non-aggression principle, and I want to also talk about self-ownership and private property rights. Now, a little bit of background on this is in the last year and the last few months, me personally, I've kind of moved closer and closer to a stronger libertarian version of myself, I guess. I don't know how to put it. Like, I've kind of been looking at this last year where it was a lot of, you saw a bunch of authoritarianism in the last, during the whole Trump era and before, but, just focusing on the last 4 or 5 years of just a constant back and forth of the culture war between the left and the right. I just kind of reject the whole left-right paradigm. Liberals and conservatives, they're not really consistent on all their viewpoints and arguments. And so while I usually would sympathize with conservatives more and on most issues, I'd rather opt out of that whole left-right paradigm. With that being said, there's several different variations or factions of libertarians, right? Small L libertarians are just, hey, they just want to mind their own business. They don't want anybody messing with them. They're not going to mess with anybody else, right? That's the most basic version. And then there's all these other variants. And one of those variants, the anarcho-capitalist, one of their biggest things that they believe in, which I adopted, right? The non-aggression principle, which in my own words is essentially that no person has the right to use aggression or violence on another human being, with the exception of self-defense, because then, the N.A.P's broken at that point. But that's it, right? So no violence, no aggression, towards another human being. And that if you're going to have a government, a state, that they cannot intervene, into a situation, or they themselves cannot use aggression, force, or violence against another human being unless they've already violated that principle. And then with that being said, another principle is self-ownership, that only you own yourself, right? No one else can own you. You own yourself. The government doesn't own you. So that means your natural rights, your life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, quote unquote, but also your property that belongs to you. As long as you acquired that, legally, right? Meaning you didn't steal it from anybody else, and that you got it on your own merit, then that, or even if it was inherited to you or given to you, whatever the case is, if it's your property, whatever, whether we're talking about possession or whatever, your own body, a home, whatever it is, land, just material things, whatever. If those are legally acquired by yourself, then that's your stuff, and no one else has a right to it, to include your labor, your money. Yeah, so that's basically three things, right? The N.A.P, the self-ownership, and private property rights, right? But I know we want to focus more on the N.A.P, right? The non-aggression principle, in regards to victimless, non-violent crime. Because in my opinion, if we were to say we live in a free society, if someone's being peaceful and they have not committed an act of violence or aggression towards another person, then regardless of what the quote-unquote law is that may have been broken or violated, that the government doesn't have a right to come at you with guns and lock you in a cage. So in our society as of now, we have, all kinds of examples where that's broken, probably by the minute. So I know that you really wanted to talk about this, so
Well, I think it's an interesting concept,
yeah.
and I think that it's easy to just assume that yeah, well, that makes sense, because I do agree with you to a certain extent. And when I say I agree to a certain extent, I want to throw out some some scenarios, okay? And I'm not combating you. I'm not trying to poke holes in it.
No,
I just
poke
want
holes
your
in it. Go ahead, go
I
for
just
it.
want
You know
your
what I mean?
thoughts
Yeah, go
on
ahead.
some of these, and maybe there's, it's not as black and white as it is made to sound, and at least in my
Well, I mean,
thought it
nothing's
is.
black and white. You know what I mean?
Right,
But to me,
right.
it's just an essential principle here, right? Like
Okay,
it's just an
all right,
essential principle.
right.
Yeah.
So as we move forward and we start talking about, you said the non-aggression principle is a non-violent act towards, or non-aggression act towards somebody else.
Well, wait, what do you
Okay.
mean?
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I heard it from what you
No, no. So
said
the
is,
non-aggression principle is that unless you commit a violent act
right.
against another person,
Okay.
then you should not have your rights and freedom denied of you, right? Like
Okay.
you shouldn't go, you shouldn't, like the state should not step in and intervene and throw you in jail or whatever the case, unless you've actually committed an act of violence or aggression towards another person.
Okay. So
Yeah,
when I talk about poking holes,
yeah,
let's do the first one.
go for it.
Driving down the road at 115 miles an hour, weaving in and out of traffic. Not hurting anybody, am I?
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not acting aggressively towards
well,
somebody
see,
else.
it depends now, because if you are weaving through traffic and cutting people off and you're causing an accident,
Okay.
then you have committed an act of aggression.
Okay. All
If
right.
you're
So
causing
that's
other
fair.
people to be on the road and react to you in certain ways, right? Because you're purposely driving through a highway like that, then you've essentially violated. Right? You're using aggression to people on people on the road. Now, if there's no one on the highway and there's a blue skies, not a car on the road, and you're going 115 down the highway, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you see even though the speed limit is 75 and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going 115, should I not get pulled over and be given a ticket? Or should I just not be bothered at all? Just, well, he wasn't hurting anybody, so we're not going to worry
Are you
about it.
talking about the scenario where you're weaving through
There's nobody,
traffic?
the one you just said. There's
If there's no one on the highway,
nobody on the highway. Just that one
and
cop that's sitting there waiting for speeders to go by.
yeah, I don't think you should be pulled over.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, the way I look at it, and when you talk about non-aggressive acts towards other people or violence towards other people,
Mm-hmm.
is things such as, well, what did Al Capone get put in prison for? Yeah, he obviously had aggressive acts towards people, but it was never proven, right? And he got put in prison for tax evasion.
Yeah.
So that I agree with you. I agree that if I choose not to pay my taxes, that I shouldn't have somebody come up to my home with guns drawn, knock on my door, and put me in handcuffs and take me to prison because I decided not to pay my taxes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. But let's go another route. And I think you and I've kind of had this discussion. One of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion because it was interesting and it's
Mm-hmm.
intriguing because I've
Yeah.
never really thought about it
Yeah.
until you brought it up to me not too long ago. And one of the discussions we had was being a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Let's say I choose to make meth in my home.
Mm-hmm.
I have them completely illegal, not something you're allowed to do by law because it's an illegal drug. And you and I were talking about it, and you said, yeah, you should have every right to make meth in your home if you choose to. Did I misunderstand that?
Well, I mean, the problem is you're predicating on the laws we have right now. So obviously that's illegal right now. One argument you could make that situation exists because of the laws and the structure we already have in place, right? Like someone's making meth in their house in the first place because we live in a society that all these different things that came into place that's even a thing. And to me, it's kind of it's almost like a gotcha situation. You need to start way before that with society in general. If you actually had a society that actually respected the N.A.P. literally from state to citizen. Like if there was no prohibition period on substances, right, it might not lead to that situation where someone needs meth to get their high and then get addicted to it. Someone's making meth illegally and they're making that narcotic in a house because it's like the whole society and the way that those people's lives have gone, through life has gotten to that point where they're doing that. I believe in a society where drugs wouldn't be illegal in the first place. Someone wouldn't have to make meth in their house to get, like, that wouldn't be a market because it wouldn't be this prohibited black market item. You know what I mean? Like, you could just go to the drugstore and get whatever drugs that someone wants to get in a legal fashion. You know what I mean? Like,
so like a synthetic type.
Yeah, whatever. Like that will be market driven in the first place, right?
Sure. Well, okay, I get that, but I guess the intent on me asking about that, and when we talked about this in the past,
well, let me interject real quick because here's the thing: if someone sells just say we actually had a laissez-faire free market, and someone sells a product that leads to someone's death, there's consequences for that. If you were to go buy some like Tylenol or something off the shelves and it literally led to your death, there's consequences for, if that was happening, if that was a thing, those people would be brought to justice. You know what I mean? Because it wouldn't be this black market situation. A company will be held liable for selling a drug that led to the death of people. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, we've created this society, this black market society, this, what's the term? Like not just black market, but like I can't think of the term where you have like an underground version of society or whatever. I can't even think of the term right now.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like this in the shadows part of society, right? Like everything's like in the dark. Clandestine, not clandestine, just like a under society, like a
underground. I think works. Black market type
you
thing.
create this like underground society, right? Where all these these black market items and things are done in the shadows, right? And there's no oversight. We've created a situation where that's a thing, right? Rather than having things be out in the open and then market driven, and instead we create this underground society. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
So
okay, well, no,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to.
Oh, I get it. I guess my point is the whole intent behind the principle we were talking about was non-aggression, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess my point is, as we talk about non-aggression principles, is what deems a non-aggressive act that is still considered a jailable offense to be put in prison.
I don't think there's anything that's a jailable offense unless you've committed violence, right? I mean, aggression to me is essentially violence. You've aggressed against another human being, right?
So I get that. So my point is me going out, and when I get back, I want to go back to the drug thing, and you kind of touched on it, but I want to go back to it. And if I'm going out there and I'm making meth in my home, that's my decision. I should be able to do so if we live in a society where I can do what I want.
Yeah.
And I'm not hurting anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But if I decide to then distribute that meth, I'm not being aggressive towards anybody. I am selling it to somebody. They're making a personal decision, a personal choice to buy this narcotic from me.
Mm-hmm.
In your mind, not saying in your mind, just in the principle and the philosophy of what you're saying with this non-aggression principle, is that person should not, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, I'm just saying that person should not be put in jail based on this principle.
You're talking about the drug dealer?
Yes.
Again, you're talking about a society where prohibition is in place, where people have to resort to making meth in their home, and then people have to resort to buying it from them. I mean, the basic premise right now is if any grown human being could choose to put whatever substance they want into their body, period. And if that destroys their life, that's on them. Right?
Okay, I got you.
Right?
All right,
so let's jump off. It's on them.
Let's jump off the drug thing. All right, let's move on to a different one.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you, like I said, I'm just having fun, just sitting here trying to see.
That's fine.
What
I mean,
levels?
a lot of people do that, but it's like you got to think like if you could just go and get something over at CVS,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
I don't
why are you
disagree.
gonna go
Now,
into this neighborhood where in some like cracked
yeah.
out meth neighborhood? You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't even exist if that wasn't even a thing. At least not on a scale anywhere near what it is today.
Now,
That's
I
my
hope I
opinion.
can't go into a CVS and buy heroin. I don't really want that to be a world I live in, but that's just me. But
Yeah.
but so let's move on. I want to ask another one then. Okay,
Mhm.
let's get away from the drug thing.
Yeah.
And this is not this may be an aggression towards a person
Okay.
if you're extending property to that person.
Yeah.
I am not a aggressing towards you,
Hmm.
but you get out of your car, you go into a store.
Yep.
I walk up to your car, I jump in your car, I hotwire it, and I steal your car. Do you consider that an aggressive act towards
Yes,
that person?
because I believe again that's why I tied in uh, self ownership and private property rights,
Okay.
right?
Nope,
So
that's fair.
it does extend to your property because that's your legal possession, and so and actually most definitions of the N.A.P include any aggression or violence towards you and your property. So, that's usually part of the definition as well. So definitely, yeah,
Okay, no, and that's good to know. I mean,
yeah,
and the reason I'm asking about that is because as you have people listening to your podcast, these things they may not understand. They may
yeah.
want to
No, that's a
just
good
for
point. That's a good point.
clarification.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I'm glad you brought that up.
So ultimately, when we start talking about the non-aggression principle, and Aaron, I actually do agree with you.
Hmm.
You and I are talked about it. Uh, we've had we've had people that we've known that were in the military. I mean, I'll be honest, I was in the military, and you know that was one of the discussions that we've talked about. Is another one that's part of this thing is what happens if you decide you want to leave the military without completing your contract? Well, there's going to be some people on that side. Oh my gosh, you should go to jail. And others say, well, I think that if they do it properly, or if they've, I just like any job, you have the ability to resign at a certain point, and there's benefits you may lose by resigning, whatever the case may be. But I don't want to go down that path because I know you and I've talked about that, and that's really goes on down a completely different path than what we're talking about. But it's the same principle in the fact that why should you be put in jail for doing that? Just like why should you be put in jail for tax evasion? Why should somebody be put in jail for going for having 25 unpaid parking tickets? At what
Exactly.
point have I warranted being put in prison because I don't know how to park? And
It's like I
and
said, in a real in a free society, a peaceful person should not be put in jail. Each of those examples, tax evasion. I mean, you kind of jump to the extreme, but that's the thing. A lot of people don't understand, and mainly we're talking about income tax, right? And it has happened in history where people did this. There's plenty of cases like from the 50s and stuff, but if you refuse to pay your income tax, they'll seize your assets, they'll seize your bank account, they'll seize your house, they'll take all your possessions, and at some point, men with guns are going to arrive at your home or wherever you're at and put you in a cage and lock you in a cage. And if you resist, they're either going to beat you up and lock you in the cage or they're going to kill you. All right. So that's for tax evasion. You talked about enlistments. Trust me, there's a very, very minority position that you and me are taking on this. Because a lot of people are like, oh, if you're a grown adult and you sign that contract, you're locked in. But I'm sorry, I actually believe in the 13th Amendment, which is, involuntary. There's no involuntary servitude. Like, I actually do not believe in slavery. So all I'm saying is, in those certain situations, if someone didn't want to continue doing that and it was before their enlistment, all I'm saying is if that person like refused to work, at some point, men with guns are going to show up to that person's house and lock them in a cage, even if they're just sitting there doing nothing. And all I'm saying, that's wrong. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences, financial consequences, their reputation's destroyed, they're blacklisted, blackballed or whatever, and they have to pay $100,000 back, whatever it is, all the money for training. If they got a degree, they have to pay for that, like whatever it is. All I'm saying though is that, and there's some people that say that those people should be shot, right? Deserters should be shot. Like we've all heard that, like in times of war, whatever. But to me, it just seems kind of drastic because yes, you signed a contract saying you're going to do this. But the point that you decide that you don't want to do that anymore, but you're forced to, that is now slavery, is it not? And if you're free to do that, you could literally be locked in a cage. And if you fight that, then again, you're either going to be beat up and be locked in a cage or killed. And I know that you kind of disagreed with me coming back to taxes, where I also made the argument that, in a way, at least to a certain extent, income tax, like there is the phrase, taxation is theft, which I've talked to you about before. But think about it. If the government takes 30% of your income, then what's that, 4 months of the year, if I'm doing my math right? You're literally working for the government. Did you volunteer to work for the government for 4 months? Because if you didn't, that is slavery. And if you refuse, again, men with guns are going to show up and lock you in a cage. Right? It's just like substances. You're just talking about drugs. You put a substance in your body. Did you hurt anybody else? Did you? Now, I'm not saying there's not other things that could have happened. Like, I don't know, maybe in the pursuit to get that substance, you broke into someone's house or something. Okay, obviously you could get busted for that. But if you didn't do any of those other things and you just simply put a substance that's been deemed illegal into your body, right? And you didn't commit any other acts of aggression to get to that point, we're going to lock that person in a cage. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I agree. And like I said, I mean, I do agree with you on the principle of the non-aggression.
yeah.
I definitely think that the need to lock somebody in a cage just because they did something that is not like I said, a parking ticket, speeding ticket.
Yep.
I think that there's a lot of people that are in prison today that don't belong in prison. For sure. And then there's also a lot of people that aren't in prison that I think should be in prison.
Absolutely.
But at the same point, the problem is what is stopping people from breaking those laws. Now, I know you've talked about the predicating on our current society and laws and how it stands right now.
Yeah.
But if you continually park in a handicapped spot, and that's just, you just say, I don't care what anybody says or does, because there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And I keep getting tickets, I keep getting fined, but I'm going to keep parking in a handicapped spot because nobody's afraid of our society, the societal.
I mean, see, again, I mean, you brought it up though. We're predicating on our current society, right? So I guess I got to break down the whole, because we keep bringing up society, right? So a lot of people do the left and right. Like the left is, to the extreme you have communism, and to the right, to the extreme you have fascism, and then so you got to bring it to the center. And I outright reject that. Right? So to me, it's authoritarianism on one side and it's anarchy on the other side. And in the libertarian, whatever you want to call it, libertarianism, there's several different factions, but the main thing is it's minarchist on one side and anarchist on the other side. And a minarchist is somebody who believes that that society is governed by a very minimal state, that the state only consists of security. So like some people call it the night watchman state, right? Like it's only military, police, and courts, and that's it. And the government has no, is not part of any part of society for any other reasons except for police, court, and the military, right? So that's like a minarchist state. And then you work your way from one side to the other towards anarchism. But when we say anarchy, we're not talking about Mad Max. We're talking about a structured civil society that's based on capitalism, the market. And so in a society that was more in that direction, if someone was parking in a handicap spot, that lot would be a private parking lot. That store and that parking lot, and it probably is like that in many situations today, actually, like where the parking lot probably does belong to the store. And if that store has their rules where you don't park in a handicap section, now they could say, hey, you're not allowed to come on our property anymore. And if you come on our property, now you're breaking the N.A.P. So now I can use force. And now I can, if need be, if you force your way in, put you in a cage because you've broken the N.A.P.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
No, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. So, well, Aaron, we have about a minute left with our time here on our time together with this very intriguing topic. And honestly, I would like to continue a conversation sometime down in the future on this, because I think it is something that is really kind of shows the society on where we're at today and where we could be, and what the differences could be in our society. Absolutely. So to close out for me, Aaron, when on this topic in the non-aggression principle, is I agree. And while I don't think that people should be put in prison for something that is non-aggressive, and while we are dealing with the society today, I think that people like yourself and other people in this world that think like you do are on the right path to actually making changes in society. So I want to thank you for having me on, and just the ability to talk about this. And reality is you teaching me a little bit more about it, because it's not something I've really thought about in the past. So I really do thank you for that, and thank you for your time today.
Well, I'll just close with the main thing when we talk about the N.A.P. and all these principles. The main thing here is that these principles, they promote human liberty, and that is what I'm all about. I'm all about promoting and believing in liberty, in human liberty, and a force for human liberty, right? And at the end of the day, that's all this is. Like the N.A.P. and all these situations, it comes down to individual liberty and a free society, free people in a free society with individual liberty. And that's the society I want to see. That's the society I would like to see for the generations to come. And I'm not saying that we don't have a free society, but I want it to be more free, more liberty, more freedom. And I think there are forces in play, and the last year with COVID, the COVID regime proved that the forces are fighting that. They're trying to restrict that, if not all out eliminate it eventually. So that's all I got. I'd love to bring you on again and discuss this further. With that being said, you've been listening to the Aaron Burr broadcast on the Free Thought Doctrine.